If you're spending more time battling awkward tools than battling bugs, check out Seek. You can install it anywhere and get instant visibility in how your apps and services are behaving in production. Seek collects structured logs from Serilog, Microsoft Extensions logging, and other libraries, and presents them in a real-time web interface that's like a log file, but with superpowers. Learn more about Seek at datalust.co/SEQ. That's datalust.co/SEQ. Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm talking with Inés Sombra. She's the VP of Engineering Core Systems at Fastly. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Scott?
How is anyone right now? I think we decided that's the new way to answer how are you.
Yeah, I think it's just like, as long as you woke up, you're able to just like have something to groom. And You're just like, you had a beverage, a warm beverage this in the morning. You're just like as peachy as it's going to be.
Yep. Someone asked me how I was recently, and I said I'm vertical. And they thought that was an achievement. Good job being vertical today. So yes.
I have to say that horizontal and then just like especially napping is also like my preferred state these days. So I think vertical would have been like, oh, I'm sorry you're not napping.
So, that is also valid. Napping is definitely at a premium right now.
Yeah.
So you are the VP of Engineering Core Systems at Fastly. You've been at Fastly for over 7 years now.
Yes.
And you have a master's degree in computer science. I'm curious, when did you start? You have 2 master's degrees.
Because I was enamored with education and I decided that I was going to do computer science. And then I did information management, which is kind of like the MBA, but like given by the engineering school. So that was a funny story because when I was in the CS side of the house, I had to lie and not say that I was doing the other one because you were not serious as a CS if you care about how things and worked organizationally. And on the other side, you just basically were like, had to lie because I was like, yeah, no, I'm just taking this as the serious path. So I had a double life and I got one of each. And then after that, I decided that academia was it for me.
Interesting. So you're out there at Washington University in St. Louis, you're getting your master's of computer science, and then you're sneaking over to the business school and pretending to care about business, or you actually deeply care about both?
I deeply care about both, and then I recognize that is unusual. Like the information management side was kind of like how you run a business, but from an engineering perspective. So I think that felt a little bit more natural to me. I actually wish I would have gone for the MBA. At that point, I was prejudiced, and I was like, no, if it's not by the School of Engineering, I'm not going to do it. But I used to work at the B school, so that's how I paid for grad school. So I would have a full-time job from like 8 to 5, and then just go from like 5 till whenever. And that's how I spent my youth. And I really don't think I could do it anymore.
Do you ever look back on that and just say, how did I have the energy to do not just 1, but 2?
All the time. And in a way, I don't regret it. It was very highly formative. I was just like, I'm still like surprised that I did it for so long.
So what's interesting about this, though, is that it shows early on a focus on how systems fit together, not just computer systems, but systems of people, organizational systems. Was that always a thing that you were interested in?
I think it's a thing that I naturally gravitated with because I think probably I'm better at the system of people than the systems. I would understand when a system fails and then ultimately it would have a result or like a cost that was rooted in the organization, the people, the team, the management, the structure, the processes. So they became really coupled very, very quickly. It's like, you don't do this, you can have the best technology, the most perfect, like beautiful, pristine, like abstraction in the right programming language where nobody, unlike, Hacker News, will be able to like say a bad thing about it. But if you have the wrong leadership, or if you have the wrong approach, or if you have the wrong directions, or the team doesn't support it, or the organization doesn't support it, it just fails. So for me, it was mostly like, how do I make sure that the time that we're spending has the maximum value for what is needed? And it became just a thing where I couldn't find an answer that was satisfactory to me unless you look broader than just like the specific thing that you needed to do. So that's kind of like how I ended up in this spot.
One of the things that I've been really interested in the last 5 or 6 years is helping early in career people get, farther and get, move forward in tech. And I have noticed, and this is an opinion, my opinion,
Hmm.
that a lot of people seem to have blinders on. And by blinders, I mean their eyes are just moving forward. They try to learn the syntax of the language. They try to learn their for loops and their algorithms and stuff, but they seem to miss out on larger systems thinking, that it's not the code in front of you, it's the people, it's organizational willpower, it's that you don't have enough testing, it's any one of 1,000 different things that have nothing to do with the code itself. Am I wrong to think that this is a new problem?
I think it's when you're learning is overwhelming too. How are you going to be aware of nuance unless you go? I actually like if you're starting today, my advice would be start from this and then just like you abstract away as you get comfortable. So I don't necessarily think that is a bad approach. I do think that is an approach that is like like stifles growth if you never transcend past it. But at some point, you need to learn one thing, and then you build knowledge around it. And if you don't, this is kind of like trying to learn a language. If you don't have the nouns, then you can't put them together, and then you don't do playful structures or even poetry after, like unless you know what those words mean. So I see it more as like an evolutionary step, and I can tell like where a person is on their career and in the growth journey based on like what level of connections and what level of problems they bring.
That's a really nice way to put it. I mean, like speaking linguistically, right? When you have the tools, the building blocks, the nouns, the verbs, and then you are playful with it, the same thing can apply organizationally. When you understand a system, you can start saying, well, what if we change this management structure? What if we move that over there? Or if you're thinking about a cloud system, I understand this building block and that building block. Let's think about plugging them in differently together.
Yeah, and at this point, like I have those conversations in varying levels, and I have like, for example, in a given week, I would have a conversation with somebody that is extremely technically capable, but doesn't know how to hack the organization to get an outcome. Or I have like somebody that sees all the problems, but doesn't know how to just like make sure that they chart a good strategy and a solution to address them that is iterative and then just also like appropriately evolutionary. So I don't know. I think when you're getting started, it's hard enough. So if you know your nouns or if you know the colors or if you know just like even how things are called, then you're doing great. But at some point, the expectation is that you're able to abstract it away and then look at like, am I aligning myself correctly? Am I doing the thing that is like the most impactful that I can do? So that is how I tend to like think about that journey.
Hmm. You've done a number of really great talks at conferences. You've been speaking for a very long time. And two of my favorite talks that you've done are The Sign of the Times, and we'll put links in the show notes to these talks, and then The Fallacy of Fast. And in both of them, you juxtapose kind of the needs of the company, the needs of the technology, and then limitations. Everything is a balance. And there's
Mm-hmm.
this joke in software engineering that I'm sure you've heard, that when you tell the customer you can have it, you have three choices. You can have it good, fast, or cheap. Pick two, and that it kind of encapsulates that there's always a constraint in a system. You can't have everything, but it seems
Yeah.
like we're supposed to strive to have all of those things. We're supposed to want all those things: good, fast, and cheap.
Yes, we're supposed to want like we and it's wanting is fine, right? It's like wanting is like what makes you get out of the morning and do something, but good, fast, and cheap is like you cannot get good without some thought. And if the problem is hard, then you just like you trade off, and then it's just like there are levers that you move. So at some point, it's just like in the continuum, depending on what you need to do, you have to actually figure out what are the appropriate trade offs in that moment. So if you're trying to do something really really hard that the organization has never been able to do before, then trying to ram it in and then just going fast likely won't give you the result that you want. You may be able to try it, but like, yeah, they're always in contrast, and it's always just like a motion, and it's just like a thing that is just like fighting it out, and you have to pick. Um, Based on my personality, though, I have had to learn how to go for things that are slow, and I think that as my own evolution management has happened, like first I just wanted like done, and then I just like I need to even hear it. And I'm the type of person that if you speak very slowly and take pauses in your sentences, you're just gonna drive me crazy, and I will start like pattern matching and trying to finish them in my head. Uh, but organizationally speaking, it just doesn't work that way. So any plan that I would try to do that's just like where the organization is not ready, I've had to learn how to lay them out in years even, or like months, years, of just like very quickly or very, very just like I can quickly checkpoint it, but the plan is not going to get done tomorrow. And if I intend to do that way, then I failed. So it's hard because I gravitate towards fast. I speak fast. I do everything there, um, and that moment or learning when something needs to be given a little bit more time has been a learning journey for me as well. And I think in the pandemic, the thing that brought it the most home was when I took up gardening. No matter how fast you want a plant to grow, it's not going to do what you want, and you're going to love it to death, but you're going to kill it. So yes.
That's funny. I think that you and I are similar in some ways. And my wife yesterday told me to stop interrupting. And I was like, you're talking so slow, though. Like, I interrupted only because I knew where you were going and you're wasting a lot of time. So here we are. We don't have the patience to go all the way to the end of the sentence without interrupting. But then we have to make plans for 6 months, a year as an organization.
Yeah. I actually had my former boss used to call me Interruptosaurus. So, so I have to make sure that right now it's like those are the moments that I deeply regret the most, is when I didn't leave enough space for folks to just have an opinion. So I really, 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 really have to pay a lot of attention to that, and I'm kind of shit at it, to be honest. So if you report to me or into me, I'm so sorry. I'm still trying. It's an area of growth for me. So yes.
Yeah, I was actually the advice I was given by my wife because she heard me on a conference call. We were in the car a couple of days ago, and she said, "You need to call that person back and apologize for interrupting." And I was like, "You really think I do?" And she's like, "You really should." I was like, I don't think I interrupted that much." She's like, "No, you need to call them back." Like, I think that's just how we talk. And she's like, "No, nobody talks like that. That's not okay." So I think I'll do that after this podcast.
Or just maybe not call, just drop a message. But like I have had definitely situations where I'm like, this person was saying something good and I accidentally shortened the moment. And then it was a teaching moment for the organization or for the team. So yeah, so fast. I tend to gravitate towards that and have a predilection for it. But I actually have had a lot of experiences by just getting it wrong of like, when is it appropriate to move slow, and then how important it is for some things to take their time.
This, in fact, is a really great segue to your talk that you did on the fallacy of fast, because you actually call out that often that mistakes that are made in the development process can mess up the stability of your system, because in an effort to get something done quickly, you can unknowingly sacrifice overall quality. And that can be a large decision that was made quickly, or even small decisions that you can make. And it'll destabilize not just relationships, but large systems.
Yeah. And that was what I believed in 2015. Now I believe that all of the decisions are going to be wrong in one way or another. So it's just like when you're trying to get something out, you're going to have to make compromises. And then just like you just don't know when. So like maybe the whole thing would be just try to minimize the blast radius and then just recognize when something is not working and not get too precious about it and just change it. And then do know that it's going to be wrong a little bit further down. It's just mostly like how much runway can you get out of a wrong decision?
The analogies that you're using are surprisingly they're hitting me, because you're saying stuff that I say. So I think we're somehow living parallel lives. The blast radius is an interesting one, because I said that about an hour and a half ago. I've referred to that a lot, because a decision is just a tiny grenade that's thrown into a crowd, and you just want to minimize the number of the code that's been obsoleted, or the people's goals that have been now redirected. All of those things are super stressful. But you point out that if all decisions are a mistake, you just want to make the least bad decision that you can now to move the system forward. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and also understand that you cannot stress out about getting it right. So this is one of the things that even as you advise like people that are developing, is like, you're not your code. That should be a lesson that just like that just sinks in. And at some point, like, you're not your decisions either. You are like what happens or how you react whenever the information that you're getting just like points you in the direction that what you're doing is not working. So I think just like getting stubborn, getting just like robs you from the opportunity to self-correct and just like even calibrate. But like, to give you an example, it's just like after you're in a place for a long time, then the problems and the things that you're dealing with are things that at some point you have an involvement, either because you let it fly and you're like, not my house, not my rules, is the thing that is like very near and dear to me this last 2 weeks, where I'm like, there are things that I've known, they were mine, where I didn't have like juice left in the tank to go and then just like raise a hand. And if you intend to stay somewhere for a long time, those decisions ultimately will come and be things that you have to clean, or you yourself created and you didn't know that it was going to be problematic, but then like they come and there are things that you have to face. And I actually like, I find that very like very refreshing, because earlier in my career I was like, every decision has to be the correct one and I need to know, like, and then now I'm like, all right, I don't know yet how this is going to suck, but I know that if it does, then I can go and clean it, and I would actually have an open mind enough to make sure that I can recognize it and then just like address it and call it for what it is. It was a bad thing, but it was good on time. But when it comes to like pipelines and software and things that have growth, it could have been the right decision at the moment with the right constraints and then the right balancing. But then the situation changes, and then all of a sudden it's just like it's a new environment and it's a new world. So I hope, I hope that I'm just like being specific about what you're
Well, I think not only are you being specific, you're being real. One of the things that you talk about in your talk, Sign of the Times, is you say that hyperscale changes things. Moving to the cloud changes things. And what you're describing is that perspectives evolve, and you need to get comfortable with this change. Like the only thing constant is change.
And in this industry, it's even more so. Like an entire area of development gets redesigned in the scope of a year. So sometimes it's just like, oh, should I even Kubernetes or not? I don't know. Maybe we sit it out and then just like we see the next wave of like orchestration, and then just it's a lot. So at that point, like for folks, it can just be a little daunting, but it's like it's not gonna weigh. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is daunting. You actually call it the most daunting thing. And the thing that I think I just figured out like this year, after 30 years of engineering, is knowing that you'll never be done.
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't feel good at all.
Doesn't it?
I would like to be done and go, look, we did it. We finished.
What would you do then?
Well, yeah, I guess I would have nothing left to do. But I mean, do you ever feel like you'll be like, have a meeting at Fastly and you'll be like, we're done. We finished it. It works great. Now we just keep hanging out. I don't know, like you're always improving, right? You're always changing things because there's always some new operational need that comes up that didn't exist before.
Or like the magnitude and the volume is larger. So we're never done. So I don't really think that it's like I even know what would I do, because like I would go find more things that need to be done, or like when the pressure point moves to a different one, then you just like the problem moves there. So no, I think I actually would find the world very boring if it was done. I'm glad that it's never done, and I'm glad that it's always moving, and I'm glad that there's always just like new things and pop up, and then what look good in one place is not. It's just like I actually kind of enjoy that. I think it would be very boring for me if it was ever done.
Mm-hmm. JD, when did I visit you? What year was that in Wellington, New Zealand?
Well, it must have been a few years back now, probably about 5 years, 6 years.
I think it may have been longer than that. I remember that I was having a low blood sugar and I went to a convenience store, and I don't know if I was texting you or WhatsApping you, but you were like, we're right nearby, come by. And I went into the convenience store, and I'm imagining this in my head. And then I went upstairs, up, and I found like 4 or 5 nerds in a building above a 7-Eleven with an idea. And that was early Raygun days.
Absolutely. That was about the time we were launching Raygun. I don't know if you'd started using us yet in your own little app.
You showed me, because I was like, I had this little iPhone app that I was doing with Greg Shackles, and we kept having crashes, and on an iPhone they just poof, and the app poofs and it goes away, and there's like, you can go and sign up with Apple and they'll send you stuff. I just wanted a line number, right? I just wanted to know, tell me where it crashed and give me the call stack. And you're like, hang on, let me show you how this works. You send me a trial key. I think Greg set it up in like a weekend, maybe a couple hours. And then I started getting emails, and I was like, that's cool. I'm getting emails. I'm getting a call stack. But then the cool part was when I got an email that said, this has happened 14 times in the last 2 hours. And I was like, hang on a second. And I started bucketing in it and got smarter and smarter. So it went from a simple idea to now I can tell you that, people in India were having trouble on Tuesday afternoons with my app, and that's because I had this code. It was so cool. It was
It's
so
like
cool.
the black box flight recorder for your software is the way I like to think of it.
Yeah. And you were 4 or 5 nerds in a building in a tiny, tiny little office, little weird L-shaped office. And now we're in 150 countries and you've got thousands of software teams using Raygun.
That's right. Yep. It's just growing, growing, and growing all the way from Wellington, New Zealand.
That's so brilliant. And people can just go sign up at raygun.com and they can set it up basically on any language, on any environment in a couple of minutes.
Absolutely. So pretty much every language and platform, mobile, web, backend, crash reporting will sort it on all of them.
That's brilliant. Okay. Well, Raygun has been a supporter of Hansel Minutes from very early on. I appreciate you all, and I'm so happy to see your success. Folks can sign up for a free trial at raygun.com. You talk about evolving and evolutionary feature sets as opposed to kind of like revolution. You're always talking about re-architectures, but when I think of re-architectures, I tend to think of them being like a rewrite. But the way that you describe it in your talks is that they're more iterative, and that the best approach for a re-architecture or something of a system that is now somehow not meeting the needs, it needs to grow in some way, that you can go and re-architect that in a smaller, more evolutionary way.
That's my preference. Like, I have yet to see like the V2s that are just like all encompassing to come and just like land in one place. I'm very distrustful of that. So I know that they exist and I know that people are able to swing it. It's just not my predilection. I believe that a plan is much more likely to be fruitful when you can just like see it, walk it a little bit forward, and then just like course correct it if it's not going well. So I am very, very hesitant. I don't know if I think maybe once we've rewritten a whole thing, but even if like we've rewritten whole pipelines, but they don't just like happen from one point to the other. And I also don't think it's appropriate. We make internet like we make the internet. We can't say, "Hey, internet, stop for 2 years until I get this component finished." So like I never even just like I don't attempt that. So my plans tend to be considering the fact that we have internet to make for the next 2 years. What are the steps that we can take today to make sure that whatever is like stopping us from making better internet like gets addressed, and then how do we move the needle? And what I like to do with the teams that I manage myself is like every 6 months or even just like at least for once a year, we sit down and be like, say that we double our traffic, where do we fall over? So that's a little bit kind of how I tend to approach them. But there are big rewrites that are necessary that have worked. It's just like I don't tend to. They're not my preferred path.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because the industry that you're in is one where the car is on the road and it's never going to stop. And you might want to change the engine or change the tires, but you can't pull over. There's no pit stop to make. It has to continue. Well, other people can release some software and turn it off, or maybe they haven't released the software. A lot of startups are creating things and they don't exist yet. So the luxury of not having your software have a 24/7 5 nines uptime and all those kinds of things is very different than the life that you're living, which is you're powering the internet, so you better not mess it up.
Yeah. And when we do mess it up, it has a large blast radius token. Going back to your grenade thing. Yeah, I think it was one of the times where my parents are still in Argentina, were like, that's what you do. And I'm like, yeah.
Did they figure it out? I'm still trying to explain to my dad what I do.
No, not quite. Like my dad still just like doesn't super understand, but they knew that point. That was I guess that's you're there.
Mm-hmm.
So no. It was interesting. It's like that gulf between the generations of my father is like, and then trying to explain what you do is like something that I just don't have any advice on. Has there been? What did you do with yours?
My dad is a firefighter.
Oh.
So he like goes into buildings and hits them with axes and like pulls babies out of smoky rooms. And a couple of days ago, I did a talk at Microsoft. I drove from Portland to Seattle, and I said, I'm going to be on the Microsoft website. You can go here and you can watch me. And then my mom snuck up and took a picture of him watching me give a talk. And he's sitting there like in his little man cave with his firefighter stuff and his bows and arrows and all the kind of like outdoorsy, like the absolute opposite of computer person stuff, like retired old firefighter room. And he's kind of like looking very deeply at the screen, like, yeah, that's my son. You know what I mean? And he just says, I'm very proud of you. I have no idea what you're talking about, but you look very competent. So
Good. That's great.
So I have achieved the illusion of competence to my dad. So that's pretty cool.
I mean, like, the parents are very good judge of characters in some. Okay, I suspect that your dad is like, I already like him, so my kid would love him if it was like my kid is obsessed with firefighters and then fire trucks and everything, so he'll be a hit in my household. So yeah, you do look competent though.
I appreciate that. You
Yeah,
look very competent yourself.
Thank you. I try to do practice my very pensive poses.
Is this the competent face?
It's just I have zero face control. So I actually heard folks that would get Botox to be better managers. So your poker face could not be red.
I recently learned that I do not have a poker face in meetings, and someone is trying to there's some people on my team that are making GIFs of me because someone will say something. And for those who are listening, this is a podcast, but this will be up on my YouTube. So if you want to see our faces, you can go and watch the YouTube version of this. But, someone will say something and I'll just be like,
yeah, I do too. I do the same.
And they're like, is there a problem? And it'll stop meetings. I'm like, I didn't know that my face just did that. I'm sorry that it broadcast that was a bad idea, because I'm trying to be a stoic, but I'm realizing that I just, the brain is attached directly to the face, so I can't stop it.
So you have power too. You never know that you do until you stop a meeting with just a face expression. And it's very, very weird. They're like, you being here is a big deal. And I'm like, why? I don't know. Why? But yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, a bit of a subject change here, is logging and metrics. In everything that I've seen you write and talk about, you feel really strongly about these two critical data pipelines, the logging pipeline and the metrics pipeline. Is that a Fastly specific thing, or do you think that all software needs to think about logging and metrics, no matter what the software does?
Yes, all software needs to think about how you log and what are the metrics that you get out of the software. The reason that I talk so much about them is that they're primary pipelines that I've been seeing through the years. So those metrics are the metrics that have every sort of customer exposure for what they do, and it's a pipeline of the systems that get the business paid. And then the logging one is anything that customer generated that may want to inspect about their own infrastructure. So it's really, really large systems. With actually fairly small teams that are just super embedded into what we're going to do. And then they're just the ones that have the most experience. I think the most experience at Fast. I think that they've been the longest ones that I've seen. So when I started, it was just everybody was 7 people in the systems organization, and now they're just entire divisions. And these two have evolved through the years. And I used to do the databases side of it, and then just then the pipeline themselves. And now we're just talking about orders and orders of magnitude. So in previous talks, I mentioned what it used to look like in 2014, and it was this big, and then now we can't even chart it. It's that large. So I think that they're very critical for anybody that is using that is constructing software. But also it's an interesting thing because the real-time API that tells you how well your infrastructure is running is a thing that just we have to make behind the scenes and make sure that it's responsible, scalable, and has appropriate level of granularity and information. So they're kind of near and dear to my heart, and that's why I talk about them so much.
And one of the things that's kind of extraordinary about Fastly and the things that you work on is that you've said that there are no hard limits on what you can log. You might say, well, let's go and log that. And then suddenly that's another gigabyte a second or something. The amount of limit, the data that you're pushing is just insane.
It is an insane amount of data. Eventually, you will hit a limit. So as a customer, you just can do whatever you want. Eventually, the computer juice eventually runs out. So when there is a limit, you notice, but
that's a technical term, the computer juice.
Yeah, computer juice, computer sparkle dust, or whatever you want to call it. But the thing about it is, as a customer, you can just go and log things, and then we have to make sure that this pipeline stays up. And then at some point, the limits that we've seen is, for example, when we just saturate a pipe going to one of the endpoints that you define, but that is less likely. But as a customer, you have a lot of ability to just go use our we don't say you can only log 2 lines right now. That we don't have there. And also that would be hard to do because it's all of the caches through the world fanning into this pool of aggregators, and then they just fan it out. So where do you make that check? And then how do you just how do you wrangle the information that is coming at you at a really fast pace from all over the world?
Mm-hmm. And when you're working in the cloud and you're trying to service a lot of different clients, these things are multi-tenant. So you have this challenge of like, do we isolate everything? That'll cost a lot. Do we do multi-tenant? Well, noisy neighbors are a problem now. How do you balance that?
Well, it gets a little bit even harder because not everything is in the cloud. So we need to keep the constraints of like systems that are hardware based, the constraints of pipelines that are cloud based, and the constraints that are things that are just kind of hybrids and in the middle. Like, for example, the login service right now is hardware based. So there are things that we plop in our own data centers. So they have a completely different set of constraints than the ones that we put in a cloud provider. So like the metrics one is like it's in a cloud provider, the login one is on hardware, and then we just have to make decisions that influence strategy across both planes. So noisy neighbors, yes, are things in the cloud, or like when your instances go away. That I think is more familiar to probably listeners of the podcast. The interesting thing is like, how do you translate those things into like things that are like physical machines where IPs are relevant? And that was like a huge shift for me when I came to Fastly in 2014. I was like, what do you mean that your IPs are things? And just like having to do IP maps of nets or anything, and just like networking still to me seems a little bit magical, but I know who to go and then just like say, what's an interconnect? What's like this? How do you peer? All of those things become factors that we have to balance as we make any decision. But yeah, cloud environment there's a lot of the things that get abstracted away. All of that complexity is abstracted away. That is really helpful. And at the same time, the flip side of that, it could be detrimental to the point where you're like the complexity, you don't see it, therefore you may not believe that it's there. But eventually wires are wires, computers are computers, sharks in the ocean come and then like chop on pipes to connect, and then at that point you learn the nitty-gritty of what keeps the internet machine going. So
one of the things that I think is that I like about myself is that I'm old enough that I could visit, like before I was there before the cloud was there. So like when the boss said, make the system scale, and then he went home on Friday, we would stay up all weekend and go and rack servers. So, in his mind, he was moving the cloud slider bar to like, oh, make more servers. And then he goes to golf, and then we go and buy more servers and then rack them and put them up themselves. But going back to the very beginning of the conversation, when we talked about early of career people who have never been in a data center, how do we make something like they've never seen the cloud? They just SSH into the thing. They have no concept of this. Like, did it feel different for you when you actually went in the data center and you're like, look, this is the giant Costco sized building with real refrigerator looking computers inside? For me, that was a very visceral moment. Like I could tell my dad I have been where the cloud is.
Yeah, I actually enjoy visiting the data centers. And even though like I had been in places where we used to rack them and we used to I used to work at a university, so I was like sitting right next to it was a very surreal experience. Even right now, even knowing everything that we know, to go like show up in the data center and then just like be weighted because they weigh you in as you go in, because like you have to have a similar level of weights when you go in and out, and it felt like very Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. I don't know. I don't know how that. I think it was like a wonderful experience, and I filled me with glee. I took photos that I wasn't allowed to share because our cabling and all of the thing, but I was just like
same,
one of those
same.
One of those things. Even right now, like I think one of the folks that joined my team, I think it was maybe in 2019, right in the before times, their thing was like, let's just go to the data center that is closest to us. And I'm like, yeah, let's go. And then it was awesome. I really, really enjoyed it. So I don't know. I'm torn because I think in a way, like you don't need to see it in order to actually understand how it works. But I think it's just kind of like taking kids to a zoo. Like, well, you can see animals in YouTube or just like in Netflix. Going to the zoo and seeing it there, it just makes them real. And it was kind of, it's just like,
that is it. That's the analogy. That was perfect.
Yeah, it's like I was torn about zoos too, and then just like I go and with my kid, and then he's like, giraffe, and I'm like, we've seen a giraffe and a show about a giraffe like a million times, but just like seeing it live, it's just like it makes things concrete, and maybe this is who we are as like very smart monkeys, like that we just like need to see it and then have it close to us, so it's like for it to become just like corporeal. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, I really, really enjoy visiting data centers. I think so far I've been to the one in San Jose and the one in London.
Yeah.
And then yeah, the people that have taken me like just like they're like, you're being way too excited about this. And I'm like, no, this is awesome. And they just go and they just like do this and it's like explain to me this and that and yeah, I think that is one of the advantages of working in a place that actually has hardware. So you go see it and it's kind of cool.
Very smart monkeys who took rocks and put lightning in them and made them think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So good.
Yeah, and we all agree that they were a bad idea, right?
Oh, yeah, it was a phenomenally bad idea. We never should have given it
Yeah.
to anybody. It was really not a good idea.
Yeah.
But it was a good idea to talk to you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Yeah, anytime. So if you have like from like firefighting, like or just like smart monkeys with it, or just like even plants, I'm here. And thank you so much for having me.
All right. We've been chatting with Inés Sombra. She's the VP of Engineering of Core Systems at Fastly. You can find her online in all the usual places. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.